Be a Voice. I'm Britt Carpenter, and this is Usula Media. Thanks for joining me today. Today is one of my first shows back in a while. If I peel some layers back and I look at things, this will be like a fifth season going into doing the podcast here on Usula Media. I started Be a Voice a few years ago, and for people to be a voice for what they believe in, for what they stand for. And ever since the pandemic, a lot of things have changed. Gears have shifted, and that's sort of what we want to talk about today and moving forward is changing gears. You know, we all have to change gears once in a while, and that's why I brought my guest in today. And today I have John Cruice. Hey, John, how are you?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm doing all right, John. I'm doing all right. You know, talk about shifting gears. I thought you were one of the best people to bring in and talk about that because you more than anybody know what it's like to shift gears, especially over the last few years, and try to make it work.
Yeah.
You know, well, first of all, for those who don't know, John is he is a Philly native. Delco native originally, but we won't hold that against him at this point. But he is a Philly native. How long have you been in Philly now?
I've been living in the city this round 12 years.
12 years?
Yeah, going on 12.
South Philly boy right now.
Yeah.
South Philly boy. And John, I met John 8 years ago through when I started Philly Unknown. Mm-hmm. And John, I met him because he was one of the leading photographers here in the city. He was one of the photographers that was out there doing his thing, doing his hustle, making life work for him. But at the time, John, you weren't just, photography wasn't your gig.
No, photography was a creative outlet. And so like a brief backstory about how I got into it. Like, so my original college major was architecture. After about 2 years, I didn't know whether, like, I wasn't ready to like make life decisions. Like, as a 19, 20-year-old, I'm like, I don't know what I want to do. So I switched schools and switched majors. I got a degree in business with a concentration in marketing because I figured that's flexible, and then I can bounce around and then figure out what I want to be when I grow up, kind of deal. Mm-hmm. And so I got.
Have you figured that out yet?
What's that?
Have you figured that out yet? What you want to be when you grow up?
Well, I mean, to some extent, yeah. I mean, like it's funny, like when you there was a Steve Jobs commencement speech at Stanford. I don't know if you've ever seen it or read it, but he's talking about like Stanford University being one of the more elite universities. These kids have life plans, and he gives a story about how he came upon Apple and how he had to look back at his life experiences going backwards to figure out like certain things. Like when he decided college wasn't for him, he decided to audit classes because it was no longer about getting a grade. It was about like, let me go learn something I'm just interested in. I don't care if it gets me a degree. And he went to a calligraphy class. And because he was fascinated with fonts, we have fonts on computers today. He was the first one to do it because he stumbled in on a class back in college. Like, we wouldn't be there if he didn't do that. And he said, there was no way I walked into that class saying, I'm going to put these in computers one day, because that's not why I did it. I chose it because it was interesting. And then fast forward 20 years, I remembered those things. I'm like, why can't we do those in electronic form? And then fonts were created. That's
interesting. So that's how we got some of those really crappy fonts out there.
Yeah.
From him going to calligraphy class.
Right. But like,
some of those fonts suck.
But if you've ever, I mean, you and I are both old enough to remember like early computers of like the block DOS like text.
Oh my gosh,
That's what text was. It was just the block text. And then
DOS prompt.
It wasn't until Mac came out that they put in a variety of fonts, like just so that you can express yourself in different ways. And so when it was funny, like during the pandemic, when everything shut down, I'm like, all right, well, I got 2 weeks because we were all like, if everybody just stays inside for 2 weeks, we can ride this thing out kind of deal. I sat down, I said, okay, I was a year into my photography business as a business. And I'm like, what is my brand? Like, what is it? And let me go through the branding exercise because I was, when you're hustling to build a business, sometimes you're just checking all the boxes. You're making a website, you're making marketing materials, you're doing the things,
going through the steps.
You're just trying to like, get through the list in the day. But if to build a sustainable company, you need a through line, something that like some pillar that you bounce everything off of to say, this is who I am as a brand, because that's what gets represented out in the world. So when I look back, my first job out of college was at Vanguard. I was in problem resolution. Then I got into statistical analytics, and I was doing analytics for a while. I was doing, from anything from process efficiency. Then I got into advice, and then started doing investor behavior analytics and that kind of thing.
So wait, your first job out of college was Vanguard?
Yeah.
Was that your only job working for Vanguard?
Yeah.
From the time you graduated college until the time back in 2018, how long did you work for Vanguard?
20 years.
So you took a 20-year career.
Well, I took a 20-year company
that you were making careers with.
Right. I had multiple careers. I switched gears while there.
And most people do when they're at a place for about 20 years.
Yeah.
18 years I spent with career college educations for many, many years.
Yeah.
And I worked my way through the ranks. And that's what you usually do until you get to that point where you just can't switch gears anymore.
Right.
And you're at that dead end.
Right. And I was doing analytics, and I'm like, I'm not creatively fulfilled. I went back to school, did my architecture degree at night. But to become an architect, you have to go through an internship, and there's licensing exams. And around the time where I'd be eligible to do an internship, the financial collapse happened. All of my architect friends were out of work, and it was like no firms were hiring interns at that point. So it was like, you're going to ride this out. And a friend of mine asked me to come over and do web design. And I'm like, I don't know anything about the web. And he's like, it's architecture with a different building material. Just do that here. And so I did. And then I ended up doing that for about 10 years, doing UX design. I was a senior UX designer. And by the time architecture firms were hiring again, I was the senior designer. I was making 3 times the amount that I was going to make as an entry level in an architecture firm. And I didn't have to do all the grunt work. I had teams that did all of the nitty gritty. I could think big thoughts and draw on whiteboards and do that kind of stuff. And then it got to the point where it was like, architecture was all consuming, like as a time commitment, 3 nights a week in class. The rest of the time I'm working on projects. So when I graduated, I had all this new free time. And then I started with the camera, and I started walking around the city, and I started photographing architecture and architecturally things.
So you weren't involved with photography that long?
No.
That was relatively new to you.
2014 is when I really got I had a camera for architecture school, but I didn't really know how to use it. So around 2014, I started to just do it as a hobby, where I would wander around the city and just do it. And then I was on a project, and it was we were nearing the end of my need. So now my manager at the time and I were talking about the next thing from the next exciting opportunity for me to go to. And everyone that he listed off, I'm like, they sound like retreads. None of them sound like something new. And so I said, I think I'm just done. And he said, what do you mean? I'm going to do this photography thing. I'm just going to quit. And so then I did. I gave him a couple months notice, because I was like, I don't have a new job offer. It's just I'm going to work towards this. We have a couple months on this project left. I'm not going to leave you hanging. But I'm not going to move on to another project, because I've already done those.
It's interesting because you worked for Vanguard.
Yeah.
Vanguard is a company that a lot of people dream getting into.
Yeah.
That would love to get into. They start their careers there. They finish their careers there as well.
Yeah.
20 years is a long time. That's a little bit of a vested interest in a company, and a company that vested interest in yourself as well, to be able to say to themselves, you know what? I'm out of here. I'm done.
I was always pretty early on, for somebody who lasted there 20 years, I was never a cultural fit for that company, given the way I processed things. So I was always kind of 1 foot out the door. I spent 7 years in architecture school thinking, I'm leaving as soon as I get a job building buildings. That's what and everybody knew it. This was not a secret I was holding. I was like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Not here. And I would have those conversations, because, I'm going to come in and do my job. You're going to pay me, and that's our agreement. But we're not going to pretend that I'm going to be here for the rest of my life. And so it was never really a fit for me creatively. It was just something to do until I figured out what I was going to do. And then to circle back to the Steve Jobs line, when I was sitting down and doing my branding exercise, because when I got into portraits, it felt like a design exercise again. I thought, in statistics, I took raw sets of data and I made sense of them, and I made stories out of them. And then other people could understand those stories. I was able to do that. Then when I was in web design, I took retirement planning and I simplified it into 3 steps. So the average person who has just a 401k and never really knows what to do with it says, do I have enough? And what do I need to do? Right? And so I could take the complexity of that and simplify it. And now what I do is I take the messiness of life and everybody's individual story, try to put it down into 1,000 words, and then we're going to make an image out of it. So the through line is I did it in 3 very different ways. I simplify the chaos, and I've always done that. It's just I did it in very different avenues. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of like when you think about like a branding through line, I'm like, that's it. That's what I do. I just now do it this way.
So what was your undergrad in?
So what's that? So I have 2 undergrads. So I've one in business and one in architecture.
And where are they from?
One's from Penn State, one's from Drexel.
Okay, so your first one was Penn State.
Well, first one's Penn State. The second one's Drexel.
Main campus?
No, I went to the it's called the Brandywine campus now. It was called Delaware County at the time, and I was just going there just to kind of keep my head in the game and just see what I wanted to do. And then I was actually going to like go to main campus, the following year, but then they offered a business degree, and then I got a job at Vanguard. I'm like, oh well, then I don't need to. I'm just going to wrap this up now and just move on. Because at one time I was exploring maybe I'll study economics because I love like big movements of money stories and like
macro shit.
Yeah, like I like that kind of like
Can't
thought
stand
process.
It.
And so
can't stand it.
Can't
stand economics.
Yeah, I mean I love like getting into like those puzzles because it's a puzzle to solve. It's like what is going on here? What's the motivation behind large groups of people spending or selling, and like what are they doing? But it was like, oh, I could get a job like and just have a real big boy job and wrap up this degree right here. I'm going to do that. So that's what I did. I wrapped up the degree there and I worked. I got a job.
And when did you go back for your second undergrad?
2006.
In person?
Yeah. So
Really?
that was on site at Drexel. So I would wake up in the morning, drive to Vanguard, drive to Drexel, go home, rinse and repeat. And that was kind of like.
Were you living in the city then, or were you living?
No, I was living in Haddonfield, New Jersey.
You were in Haddonfield, driving to Vanguard every day?
Yeah.
It's like what, an hour and 20 minutes?
Yeah, at least. Well,
With the
like if I
traffic
left
in the
early
morning?
enough in the morning, it was like I could get there like in an hour.
Right. But you left after 7 o'clock. You're screwed.
Yeah, right. That was
right.
basically like that was like the thing. So I started getting up at 5, going to the gym, come back, have my coffee, get in the shower by 6:30, out the door by 7, and then I'm on the road. I can get there by 8:10, and then leave, go to Drexel, and then come home, and then do it all over again, like at least 2 days a week.
So when we talk about shifting gears and everything, when I look at like the 5 years I've been doing this, or the 5 seasons, however you want to break it down, each year has been different, talking to different people about different things, about different subjects, different topics, what's going on out in the world. Our lives in the last 5 years have been turned upside down. Mm-hmm. In many ways, ranging from government to pandemic to just life in general. I made that jump. I took a 6-figure salary and I said, screw you, I'm done. I'm gonna go consult for myself. Blah 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 blah. What made you do it? I know what made me do it. What made you just throw away a 20-year career or 20-year life building career where you had vested interest, where there's probably great options at the very end there to just say, screw it, I'm done.
It's emotionally draining to not be fulfilled every day, and going and doing something that was not like, intellectually interesting to me. It wasn't creatively interesting to me. It was like, I was getting, my last review was fantastic, and he's like, I don't understand. I'm like, I mailed it in this year. Like I put in no effort, and that's what happened, because like I didn't need to try anymore. And I'm like, that's not how I want to be. I don't want to exist in that world where, I go through the motions. Like as soon as I start going through the motions for something, I'm out. And that's just, I get antsy.
I understand that totally.
Going
through the motions sucks, because then you're actually having to try, and then it becomes a task.
Right. And you're in a similar situation to me. Like I remember my buddy at the time who was married with 3 kids, at Vanguard. He was laughing at me. He goes, "You don't have any inherent problems," because I'm a single guy with no kids. He goes, "You're just like, because you don't have like, if I lose my job, like I got to like stress the hell, because I got like a lot of mouths to feed, because you just have yours. So you can like, you're in a position where you can take that risk. And he goes, plus you don't have like the day-to-day, like, catastrophes that like kids can contribute to. Like, so you got to make your own problems and then you got to solve them. I'm like, well, that makes sense.
It's funny you say that because people say that and I'm thinking to myself, they're always like, you're the only one to support. Yeah, but I got to support myself and I'm very used to living a certain way.
Right.
And I'm used to
that's true.
having that because number one, I chose not to have children.
Right.
That's a very selfish part of me because it's also very selfless because I don't want to have children, put them through that.
Yeah.
But I chose not to have them. But like, there's a way that I like to live.
Yeah.
And I need to make X amount of dollars to be able to live that way.
Yeah.
So when people always like, you don't know what that's like, I got a family. That was your choice, man. It was your choice to go out and get the family. And have the white picket house and the 2.5 kids and all that stuff.
Right.
White picket fence around the house. But like when people say that, I think they tend to forget that like no matter who you are, no matter how many kids you have, how many mouths you feed, you're all in the same boat.
Yeah, and I think that like and it's kind of like when you hear people like, and especially now, like you see it like more people go to therapy, right? And you see like people trying to trauma rank. Like we're not trying to outcompete each other. Like
the one-uppers?
Right. Well, it's like, you think you got problems, like, and it's like we all grew up in the soup that we grew up in, and some of it was beneficial and some of it wasn't, but like it's not to say that one person's problem is monumentally more difficult than another because like we all deal with it differently at different times. So
you can't compare it.
Yeah, so I don't like comparing.
You can't compare it. We can't compare even though very similar paths.
Right.
We can't compare like the outcome of them or how we feel or we're dealing with them.
No.
And we've talked many times about this.
Yeah.
We talked many nights about it. And, there's a lot of things that we also agree to disagree upon too, because of the fact that like we also have different beliefs.
Right.
And, but like following that path and following, it's never easy to just, walk away from consistency or stability.
Yeah.
Knowing that you're going to get a check every 2 weeks for the first and last and whatever.
Yeah, it's different.
It's very different not knowing if you're going to get a check at all that month.
Yes.
So you walked away from it just like I walked away from the tail end of an 18-year career of everything. And I, didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up because I never really checked any boxes. I just like sort of went through life,
Right.
And I winged it and, it sort of worked. But you did it at a time where there was such like uncertainty in the world that followed. You did it in like the beginning of 19.
Yeah.
And which was great because you were like focused. You had a good thing. You're an amazing photographer. I mean, you're one of my go-tos. I mean, if I could take you hire as a personal, you'd be there for me. And, but then all of a sudden, like a year into your gear shifting and, life changing, the world threw you a boomerang, bro.
Yeah.
And you had to sort of either duck or catch it.
Right. And for the first couple of weeks, I took the opportunity to say, I have a pause. There's a built-in pause. Nobody can go anywhere. Nobody can do anything. Let me like really go inside and figure out my branding. And then that was when I came out. Like after those first couple of weeks, I was very confident as who I was as a brand, like for photography. Like
what was that switch? What was that switch in that year that said, now I'm confident.
Well,
now
it was
I
like,
know.
Like when you're starting to get noticed, like in any type of art form, let's say for me, photography, you just start photographing whatever clients come your way, right? Mm-hmm. But like to really like do what you want to do, you have to decide, you have to put out the vibe that this is who I am and this is what I want to do, and then those people start to come back. And I was all over the place, right? I wasn't putting out any consistent message about who I was as a photographer other than I had a camera, right?
Let's go take pretty pictures.
Right. And so then it was like, okay, well, what is it that I do that's different, right? And I had done the mental health project and it was and I started working for Philly Current. It was like, oh no, there's a piece here that's like, other people don't do it like this. Like they don't get into the details of the story. They don't interview like I do. Like they don't ask questions of the subject for like an hour before I even touch my camera. Like, and so like, oh, that's different. That's a thing that's different that I do, that I get into the nuances of the human and then say, let's make that. Like,
so going back to that old adage, a picture's worth 1,000 words. Is that what they say? And for you, that's very common because that's what you believe in. You tell life stories through your photography.
Right.
You just don't take the khaki pants and white shirt picture on the beach.
No,
of a family.
And those kind of things would kind of bore me.
Not there's anything wrong with that, but that's a little weird
but
too.
creatively, they're not like, and I'll do some of those for like.
That's not creative though. Everybody does that,
right? And it doesn't. My whole thing is, and I don't do a solely digital product, right? It's going to be a piece of wall art. My goal is like every person who gets something done with me is going to have something on their wall that they get to tell those 1,000 words every time somebody comes over. And it's like, or they get to see it themselves every time they walk past it, those 1,000 words. And so let's fall in love with those 1,000 words because you're going to live with it for the rest of your life. Your kids are going to inherit it. Their kids are going to inherit it. And that story lives on. It's like, how many times do you get to write your legacy? Let's do that through photos, and let's decorate your home with those, and then they get divvied up, and then your story keeps getting told. There's an old I came across this later. I wish I'd come across this much earlier, but there's an old adage that everybody dies twice. Once when you take your last breath, and once when the last story about you is ever told. So like when there's a piece of art that just keeps going on and on, that's my way to help people be immortal. Like,
well, it was Banksy that said it's when they stop talking about you got to worry.
Yeah.
When they stop talking about you and mentioning your name, and that's usually when it all ends.
That's when it's gone.
Yeah.
Right?
So when you tell stories and you talk about it, and you being a person you're a very social being, John. You're a social being by nature. You really are. You're a sports guy. A Philly sports guy. Anybody from Delco better be a Philly sports person. If not, they shouldn't belong in Delco.
Right,
they're really in the wrong, county for that, know, or they're transplants. And I don't know many people that were like, I want to move to Delco. No, I'm joking. There are people nowadays, but, you're a very social being. You know people, that there was a project, one of the first projects you did when you made your, shift of gears was the mental health project, because World Mental Health Day takes place when?
The day is in like October.
It's a Dornock, but the month
is in May. I don't know why.
So weird. Month is May, day is October. So you did yours though for May, for the mental health month.
Yes.
And what was that? And what was the basis? Why that? Why that project? Out of anything you could have done, you could have done a calendar. You could have done like the hot influences of Philly. You could have done
right. It was something where it was.
You chose a taboo stigma subject, man.
Yeah, it was a culmination of a couple different conversations of different people, going through their own battles, right? And friends or or subjects like that I had been photographing, and these conversations come up. I don't know why. Like I tend to bring that out in people, and so I thought what? Here's the deal, and especially like for men, it's a conversation we don't have. Right, it's not a thing that we do.
We're not supposed to have that conversation.
Here's a way to change this. And originally, I did think about a calendar as a thing, but then I thought, no, let me just do it as an Instagram thing. And I thought, if I can tell as many stories as I can, and in that case, I made the goal of there's 31 days in May. I'm going to tell 31 stories. At least one of those stories is going to resonate with another person, right? And to say this isn't we're all very unique, but not that unique, right? There's so many things that are similar to say, I struggle with that too. And the idea that mental health is stigmatized because it's usually just talked about as mental illness.
Right.
When mental health is a spectrum, right? It is managing stress to serious illnesses, and it's everything in between. And it's not to say there's sane or crazy, that doesn't that dichotomy doesn't exist, right? So it was well, let me tell all of it, and as many as I can, to say human beings are all struggling in some way.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter how serious it seems to you or not. It's somebody who is telling their story. And so I thought, let me do that. And so I did that. I was able to get 31 people. It was mostly people I knew or
That's a lot of people though. 31 people to come out and to be able to be vulnerable,
right,
and share their most vulnerable aspects of their mental health,
right,
and what mental health means to them. Because 31 people, mental health means something different to every person.
Absolutely, yeah.
So when we talk about mental health, it's something that's very vulnerable, something that people don't talk about because it is stigma, it's taboo, especially for guys. Guys aren't really supposed to talk about their mental health. You got 31 people to participate the first time around that were able to come out, share their stories, what mental health meant to them, What came out of that?
Well, it was really cool because there was a couple things. One, I got a lot of feedback on just the Instagram and Facebook posts, right? People were really into it because, and some of it was like in the comments in public, and some of it were messages that people sent me saying, I'm not ready to talk, but I struggle with this too. And they just wanted somebody else to hear them, right? Everybody just wants to be heard in some way. And then that first year, what I did was on the final day, I had them all printed, and I used my buddy's chiropractic office, and I put on a show like in Old City. Like,
oh, that's right, you did. I remember.
And it was cool because there was a lot of people who knew each other that were in it together, like they were in it, but they didn't know that, right? It was like I heard a couple people say that, like, oh my God, I've known this person for years. I didn't know that. And it was like a little doorway to like, or they only knew them from Instagram, or because like we were still in that time where like, you knew people. I mean, there's still people I've never met in person. Like I've been following for like 10 years. But
same,
like,
and the funny thing is now I don't want to meet them either.
Right. Well, yeah, and we're beyond that point. But like, there was an element of like, at least it prompted a conversation. And so then I did it again. I was going to get it started earlier so that, I wasn't doing it in springtime because of, actual family bookings and things like that. And then, the pandemic started.
2020.
And then, so then I cut it off. I think I did the last two outside with a mask on, like, because we weren't sure what was happening. I'm like, I'm just going to pause this.
Did you get all?
No, I only got like 22.
Okay.
And then,
that's still good.
Yeah. And then the next year I got like 10 or whatever it was. And the next year was like, and it ended up, it started to have diminishing returns because like I kind of, like the first year, it was mostly people I knew personally, or there was a handful of people that like were like a 1 degree, like, oh, you should do John's thing, right? But like as it got to be more like random people who saw it, it became there was more like not showing up,
there wasn't a connection,
not giving me the caption, not just So it was a lot of like it started to become logistically a nightmare to try to get people to actually do it. And I'm sure I could, I've had plenty of people like, you should partner with like, an organization and do this and do that. And I'm like, that sounds like an awful lot of work. And, I told I think it was in total 61 stories over the course of the 4 years.
That's awesome.
It's a lot of stories to be told.
That is a lot of stories.
And it's not to say that I couldn't go back to it, but like, I also got to run a business. None of that was I wasn't getting paid for any of that.
So, speaking of, running a business, you left that job, you left that career, and you started a business. Just was like, screw it. I'm going to start this business. I'm going to start John Cruice Photography.
Yeah.
And what was that catalyst other than the fact that you didn't want to be at that desk anymore, driving out to Collegeville on a daily basis?
It was the thing that I was enjoying. Like, one, it is social by nature, right? And it's and I like variety. Like I don't like the rut. I don't, that's not interesting to me. But like, you have a story. That's interesting to me. Being able to turn that into an image. That's it. The constant is like the process is the process, but like every story is unique. The outcome's unique. Like being able to collaborate with people on like creating something, that's fun. And so I thought, okay, from that standpoint, like, every client I work with, it's a new fun story. And, even if it's like, because here's the thing, you have people who definitely have passions and stories and they want to tell them. Then you have other people like, oh, we're just regular people. But it's like, no one's just regular people. Like, I want to know, what do you talk about around a dinner table? What do you joke about? What makes you laugh?
Or what are you afraid to talk about around the dinner table?
Right, well, yeah.
But
like, it's like let's have fun. And what is that? And so I was like, all right, well, I'm just going to go do that. And wasn't that direct. It was like, I was getting, inquiries, via Instagram, and I was, I was getting in the Philly Current, like just, published, I wasn't working for them at the time. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm just going to go do this. I'm good at this. I'm better than a lot of people. I'm just going to go do this. And I was like, there wasn't a whole lot of thought other than that. Like, I enjoy this. I'm good at it. People seem to like my work. And this was like the first like big realization. So quick like backstory about Vanguard. I never applied for any of those positions that I ever worked at, ever. What I was good at my job until somebody asked me to go do it somewhere else, or to go do this, or to go do this. I was always tapped and asked to go do something because I was good at it. So for my entire professional career, I never asked anybody for things. I just went and I did it. I was very good at it, and then somebody asked me to go do it somewhere else, and they would give me a raise for it. Right? That was my professional experience. So that was kind of in my brain. So there was a part of me that was like, well, I'm good at this. I'm just going to put stuff out in the world, and people just come. Right? That's how this works. That's how my life has gone so far. And like that's not how business actually works in the real world. Right?
You become a little fish in a big pond then.
Right. Because it's not like it is, you have to go ask for business. You have to go do this. You have to go sell yourself. And that was not something I ever had to do before.
Right.
And so then I had to get serious about networking and meeting people outside of the ecosystem that I was living in. Right. I was very much in one bubble. I was in one company for 20 years. Like that was my bubble. And like, that's all the way out in Chester County. Like I got to get meet people around here and like really start to broaden that. And like, who do I need to connect with and daisy chain those conversations? And so that took, that was like the first year, try to figure that out. And then to be honest, the pandemic kind of sped up the process because all of these networking events, you had all these people who were so desperate to connect with other human beings, and they were doing it via Zoom, which was not ideal, but I met hundreds of people during that, during those times where everybody's just locked in their house. And I had, great conversations. And then subsequently I've gone on to meet some of them in person. And there's still occasionally a person or two. It's like, oh my God, I haven't talked to you in 3 years, but like, I only know you from this box. But like, we had these conversations, but
how did Philly Current happen? Tell me about Philly. I mean, we all know Philly Current. I mean, those who don't know Philly Current's a great print magazine here in Philly by a friend of ours, Eddie Keels, who's the publisher of the magazine. And he's been doing it for 12 years now.
Yeah, it's about that.
About 12, 14, I think, almost about 14.
I think it's 12.
Yeah, around then. And, it's a lifestyle magazine. It's, telling the stories of people in Philly that deserve to be told. How did you get hooked up with that? I mean, other than the fact that Eddie used to repost pretty pictures of the skyline and stuff.
That's how I initially met him.
Okay.
It was not like I didn't know him. And then it was funny. I was having a conversation with him because if you follow Philly Current, you'll see that I photographed the owner of Bar John,
David,
which is the
Manioc Tavern.
Which is the Manioc Tavern.
Where I ran, yeah.
Eddie and I had 2 conversations in Manioc Tavern, 2 separate occasions, and they were both transformational. Like they were both pivot moments.
One would have been the day that we had the photo walk in the below freezing weather.
Yep.
In December, that was our first collaboration.
Yes.
And the second one would have probably have been at the event for Philly Current for the clean issue. The only times that Eddie was really there.
That was it.
Yeah.
Those were the 2.
Yeah.
Right. And
shit, I remember. Good steel trap, bro.
So the first conversation I had with and it just kind of came up, and that was the first time I met Eddie. We were talking about, and that was the guy who I lived on that was the first time I met him in person, was at that event. And I was a guy, I live on the east side of the city. I could go photograph the sunrise. Like nobody else is up that early or that close to the river as often as I was, right? So like that was kind of what I was known as. And he's like, oh man, he's like, it's great that, this is awesome. Like I love your stuff. He goes, yours is always the first one I see when I open it up in the morning, because I was always up early and post it real quick. And I said, I think I'm done with those. And he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, I'm not. How many pictures of the Ben Franklin Bridge can I take? Like they're not interesting to me anymore. Like I don't even like looking at them. Like I see people still do it, and I'm like, I don't care anymore. Like I've seen that bridge 100 times or 1,000,000 times. Like I'm just like I'm past it. I said, I think I'm gonna start to explore portraits, and and he looked at me sideways. He goes, dude, just because you're sick of it doesn't mean the rest of us are. And I'm like, well, I don't care. This is my
about
page.
you, Eddie.
Right. Like, I don't care. Like this.
But in Eddie's mind, it is about him. So
right. But, and he was laughing. He was just like, he goes, yeah, but like, no, doesn't mean everybody else is sick of it. I'm like, well, that doesn't matter. Like, I'm not doing this. Isn't my job. And then when I got into portraits, he gave me a PC pick as a portrait photographer. Like he was like, oh, this is best portrait photographer in the city, and like put me in. And then like a couple months later was when I made the decision, like I'm going to just do this. And so then I told him that was the week that I decided was for that Philly Current event. And he's like, dude, that like I didn't put you in the magazine, just because we're friends, right? Like, I think you're really good. Like he goes, are you really going to do that? I'm like, yeah. He goes, well, then you're going to work for me too.
How many years has it been with him?
I did. 2018 was my first.
2018.
Summer of 2018.
Pretty awesome. How many covers have you had with them?
I don't know at this point.
A lot.
Took me a couple years.
It's a good portfolio, Bill, man, to have covers on a magazine and
Yeah.
one of the leading print magazines in one of the largest metro media areas in the country. That's great. It's a good thing.
It was like about a year or so in. I mean, we have we've had a pretty stable set of photographers since I've joined. Mm-hmm. There's maybe been one like switch out, like life happens and things like that. And so like
There only 3 photographers there now.
It's 3, yeah.
Yeah. I'm saying that's been a consistent 3.
Yeah. And it takes a while to gain Eddie's trust on like those things. And then once I got to that point, now I'm just in the cover rotation. It's like, all right, like I could just give that to him and he'll get the cover done. And so, I've gotten to do a lot more recently. Like it's just,
so you got smart. You learned how to manipulate it so Eddie doesn't come back to you and say, that's not what I'm looking for, John. And you're like, here you go, Eddie. You're just taking this.
Well, it's just like, it's...
Because I can picture Eddie doing that like, it's not what I really wanted, John.
Right. Well, and those things happen. Yeah. But usually it's a conversation ahead of time. Like it's going over him. Like, what are you picturing? Because I know he's a creative guy. He has an image in his head. And then there's been times where like, that's what, we'll try to do that. And then there's other times where I talk to the subject and I'm like, this is going in a different direction. I text him and the writer and say, that's not the story. This is the story. This is what we're doing. And that's the end of and they're fine with it. Cause like when you put somebody, and I don't know if you know the process. Sometimes it's just, I get a spreadsheet and here's your assignments. Sometimes it's Eddie and I like just on a random conversation, we come up with an idea and then like we rattle a couple off and then he'll fill the rest out. And it's like, we just kind of like, sometimes I'm involved in it, sometimes I'm not. But who are some people we want to feature? We don't really go deep into like why yet. We want to tell their story. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes we have our own narratives because of social media. It's like, well, this is who we think they are. And then when I actually talk to them, it's like, that's not the story at all. And this is going to be a much better story. And everybody's on board with it because now you got a person on the ground actually asking about the story. Interesting
that you did Bar John. It sort of went full circle because Bar John is the Old Man Young Tavern.
Right.
So you were able to go in there, and David was actually one of our customers there when I used to be the manager of Bar John, which, so to see you come full circle and to know like, the connection that we all have to that over the years is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So that's a really cool thing. Is there ever a time like in all this, I mean, like you're normally a very shoot from the hip sort of dude, you shoot straight from the hip. There's no, you don't really pull any punches with stuff. You're really, where you stand all the time. You're a very positive dude for the most part. I mean, as most people can be as positive as they could.
Right.
Is there anything that just, at any time where you're just like, F this, I can't do this anymore. This is not working. I'm not getting jobs. I'm not being able to pay my bills. I need to do something.
There are moments, I go through that. Like, because I still have not reached critical mass of my ideal clients, right? So I'm still doing, stuff that I'm not interested in because like somebody's going to give me a check and I'm like, all right, I'll go do that. But like at some point, like I want to not do that anymore. And I only want to do like, sounds like almost immature, but I only want to do the cool shit. Like I don't want to I don't want to do any of this. I just want to do this. And so I'm not there yet. And it's like, I got to get there soon or I'm just going to be annoyed that because if this is the job, it's not creatively interesting anymore.
Right.
Until I get to here. Mm-hmm. But I get enough of these to say, I love doing this, if that makes sense.
And you put yourself out there, man. You don't just go out and put it on social media. You're out there working chamber events. You're doing these weekend retreats with photographers. You're doing all these things. How do you get involved with all that? That's a lot of stuff, man. You got a lot of stuff on your plate. You're juggling things.
Yeah. I mean, I'm an extrovert by nature, right? And that was something that you talk about like a mental health struggle. The pandemic messed me up. Because I don't do well just sitting with myself. That's not productive for me. I get
Same.
no energy from that. I have to be around people. So it was like, all right, well, I'll go to these Zoom calls. I would just daisy chain like these virtual networking events together, collect a bunch of names, reach out to them on LinkedIn, see who I want to like build a relationship with and see who I don't. And I was doing that. But then this summer, like I took that a step further. I was like, I see these people at these happy hours all the time, and I know them at this level. Mm-hmm. But like, that's not where you get business from. You get business from like actually building deeper relationships with people. I'm like, all right, I'm just going to start reaching out to these people and say, we've had like a bunch of conversations, but like we haven't actually like sat down. And so I started scheduling lunches, and I start, lunches or coffee or whatever. Like we're going to sit down one-on-one for an hour and I'm going to learn more about you. Right. And they're going to learn about me in the opposite way.
Yeah.
Right? And then I started to like, I'll bring my camera. And I started to like create, then it became easy social media content. Like, I have this cool network and I don't share it with anybody. Here's a cool person I know. And people start to really like that. They were like, I want to be in that. Well, the only way to do that is that we have to sit down and have a conversation.
When you have a conversation with somebody that you may not know at all, you may not know them from anything, you might first time having a conversation, or you may know them and you're having this conversation. Are you conjuring up in your head what type of images you want from what they're talking about? Or do you put that to rest and then you start to think about it later and put it together like on a storyboard sort of thing?
Sometimes it depends on like for like an initial conversation. I do a lot of business networking events. It's a lot of business people. So a lot of times they're talking about their business because they're trying to get clients for their own business. So sometimes like I'll immediately get into the creative space of like, I could see how you could like tell a brand story around that thing. And then other times it's just business talk, right? That's not where we are right now. It's like, I want to know if I want to like have an additional conversation with them to learn more about the next thing, right? Not the company that they work for. And so like that's where those things come in. And that's when you get into, it's funny. I just met somebody who I just had lunch with her. We met at a networking event. We had a Zoom, we had a brief Zoom call afterwards. She's in financial planning. Well, so we could nerd out on the stock market and like, just like talk about like, economics. Not that you would be bored by the conversation.
I'm already bored. You mentioned that I'm bored already.
But we got into that. And then it turns out she was like a competitive ballet dancer. I'm like, let me show you like some of the stuff I've done.
Let me show you some of the photograph, the photography work I did. But
I know some people you should be talking to. I'm like, that's perfect. Right?
Because you did that one ballet dancer at the bridge.
Yes. Yeah. I've done, it's funny. Like most of my ballet portraits, it's the same dancer. It's a friend of mine who like, if I have an idea, I'll just text her and she's like, oh yeah, I'll do that. Like she's always down to like, collaborate on.
Well, isn't that typical of a photographer to have a set of muses that they will bring to their photography session? So you with a ballet dancer, the same one over and over, a mutual friend of ours, the blonde, Carolyn.
Yeah.
You use her over and over for different things. And is that true that's like a muse that they give you inspiration? They like, cause you're used to working with them. Is there creative energy flowing when you're with them?
Sometimes it's just a safe space for me to experiment, right? They don't care if I don't know what I'm doing in that moment, right? They're not paying, like, this is just I need to practice. Are you available? Mm-hmm. You'll get some images out of it and I'll see if I can pull this off. Cool, I'm in, like, I'll do that. Because like, if you're working with a client and they're paying you money, like now you got to like dumb it down to, I need to get this image. Like this isn't a time for me to like, do you have like an hour where I can just like, we might burn this entire disc? Like, does that okay?
Can you run back and forth with lights around you on the roof of a warehouse?
Right. Like, it's just like, I just want to like experiment with this. And the more I do those things, it's like, okay, now I know what to do in that situation. It's a education. This is like education for me. I gotta like, I have an idea in my head. I don't want to wait for somebody to pay me to do it. Let me ask somebody I know who's comfortable like in front of my camera, and we're going to experiment and let's see if I can pull it off. And if I can pull it off, now that I could sell that to another person, say, I know how to do this and you should pay me a lot of money for it. right? And that's kind of like the goal. So, so that's kind of like how, and there's just a couple people I know who are, they're always down. They're like, cool, I'll do that. Like, I'm like, all right. So when I come up with a concept, I'm like, all right, well, let's try that.
If anybody asks you, what advice do you have for somebody who wants to switch gears and wants to take that leap? I'm not even going to say leap of faith, but wants to take that leap of chance, of risk. What would you tell them?
You gotta really enjoy. There's a lot of it's with anything you do. There's going to be at least 20 to 30% of a bunch of shit you don't want to deal with, right? You have to love the other part of it for that to work. And if you're doing it on your own, there's no delegating that. Like, there's no somebody else will handle that, right? It's just you just have to manage that. And so you have to love the other part, because if you don't, then what do you and I've said this, I'm like, if I want to live a life where I'm not creatively fulfilled at all, I could go make a lot more money sitting behind a desk in a spreadsheet. Like, I could. Like, I still have that
get
skill
medical
set.
Insurance and all that other stuff.
Yeah, I still have that skill set. I could go do that.
that.
I could go be a cubicle drone and just go do that. But it's a big chunk of my day to hate it.
Could you do that again?
What's that?
Would you be able to do that again?
No.
You're too much of that free spirit at this point.
Yeah, I don't I could perform the tasks, but it would take me about a day before I would lose my mind.
Plus, you have your dog now.
Oh yeah.
You have Ruthie,
right?
So you can't leave her. She'll be pissed.
No,
she'll be pissed if you left for 8 hours a day.
Shouldn't do well.
No,
by
not
herself.
at all.
She's very needy.
Ruthie was a big shift for you too, though, in your world.
Huge shift.
Like that you actually took, because you're a single dude. You're a bachelor. You have your life. But during pandemic, you were one of the people who made that conscious effort to make a better, life for a dog in need. And you didn't just take a dog. You took probably one of the biggest problem dogs that Moore's Animal Refuge had to offer.
And she's still she's what, now 5, heading into 6. She's high energy. She does not have her.
John, you walk her how many miles a day?
About 5.
And she's still high energy.
Yeah.
Every day. She chews your couch.
She doesn't do that anymore. but she'll, but she gets those dogs that love their toys. She loves it for she's got the attention span of a gnat. She'll love her toy for 3 seconds and then not be interested. She's really only interested in playing with people, right? She doesn't do self-play with she'll chew on the bone if I'm doing something and I'm not paying attention, but then she'll stop, she'll follow me around. It's just she wants to be interactive. And
how does it feel to have to take care of something else?
What's that?
How does it feel to take care of something else every day?
Yeah, there's days where I'm just will you knock it? Probably that's, she probably knows her name and knock it off more than any other words. Right. But but it's also I wouldn't know. It's been 4 years now. I don't know. Actually, in March it'll be 5 years, right?
That's awesome though.
So it'll be.
She's a great dog.
Yeah. So
high energy.
So she got me. Yeah, she's got her weirdness, and it is what it is. But that's life with a dog.
But so do you.
But
you got your weirdness.
She was the first dog I took portraits of, and now pet portraits is a thing that I do. So.
Thank gosh, because you took end of life portraits for me several times, 3 times for my 3 most important. What was your favorite photo shoot you've ever done? Not to say names, but what was the gist of it? I don't want everybody else to get pissed off at you because you don't like them as much.
I would say it's probably, if you go back, the first ballet portraits I ever did. We were going to meet up at Ray Street Pier, 5 a.m. for sunrise, and I was going to do silhouettes. That was the reason why we were going there. I get there a little bit early. There's a fog rolling in. I can see that there's going to be no sun that morning. Right? It was just a cloud cover. And I texted her and she said, "Well, I already got my makeup done. I got the bag packed. I'm en route. Like, let's figure something out. So we just kind of like collaborated on the fly. And that was like the one where the fog really rolled in. You could not see Camden. The bridge is disappearing in the background. And she's doing these leaps, like it's hers, and she stands out because everything behind her is white fog. Yeah. Right. And the bridge is disappearing. And it was like, when I did those, I thought, this was before I was doing, even contemplating doing this as a job. I'm like, oh, I can do this. Like I can do this full time. Like I can do this as a job. Because that was the first time where I thought, it's not what we were there for, but it ended up being like some of my favorite images that I've ever taken, now 6 years later,
So if I want to switch gears and I want to, take that leap and it's like a year into it and I'm still like not where I want to be, what would you tell me?
Well, from that standpoint, I would really want to sit down and say, where is it that you want to be and what steps are you taking to get there? Like, there's an element of like, you got here because of the things you've done. Mm-hmm. Sometimes that's as far as you're going to go with those steps. Mm-hmm. So now it's like, well, are you going to do something different? And if you're not willing to do something different, then you might have to accept that this is the end of your road for this path. Or you have to do something. So for me, I had to go and build a new network. I had to start connecting with many new people.
You went out and got new friends?
What's that?
You went out and got new friends?
Yeah, I had to
That's
go.
Crazy.
Build.
I don't like some of my old friends, let alone get new ones.
Yeah, but I had to go. Build a new network. I had to go start asking people for introductions to this or that or the other thing. I had to do those things to move forward. Because if I just sat back and just posted pretty photos on Instagram, I'm not going to get enough business to, most people don't, like they just want their free photos on their swipes and then they move on. Like they don't stop to actually ask that person, hey, can I hire you? Right?
Yeah, I'll tell you what though, I've had some really great photo shoots with you. Some of my favorite photo shoots. We've done a Santa series every year. Yeah. Except for 5 years, did we do it? 5?
I think we did 5.
5 years we did. Yeah. I dressed up as Santa and we did different, iconic, landmarks in Philly, the ones that nobody likes to look at anymore, like the bridge and City Hall and stuff like that. But we did that. We've done other things you've done for, so if people out there are interested to look at your work, where are they going to find John Cruice on social media?
I'm everywhere. So I do, I'm
Instagram?
I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on TikTok.
For Instagram, you are?
John_Cruice. That's also on TikTok.
CRUICE. And so that's John_Cruice on Instagram and TikTok.
Yeah.
Facebook, it is?
John Cruice Photography.
Are you on that X? Or Twitter?
I have an account. I haven't looked at it in years.
What's the other ones out there?
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn.
So I got serious about LinkedIn this year. And I'll tell you, my photos get seen more on LinkedIn than they do on Instagram.
I bet. Is it under John Cruice Photography or John Cruice?
It's just my. I have a brand page.
It's just John Cruise is the brand.
It's John Cruise,
So that's great. And if people want to reach out to you, they should do so. People should really check it out. How do you think the Eagles are going to do this year, John?
I have no idea. Like they're one of the most talented teams I've ever seen.
Young team.
But we'll see if. Yeah, there's a lot of questionable decision making happening where it's where points are being left on the board, and you're like, you could have. I don't understand going for 2 twice yesterday.
Well, that's the whole thing for me is I'm not really sure who to blame for certain things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I don't know what that.
There's a lot of disconnect going on there.
Yeah,
and everything. Sirianni, I think is going to make the whole season.
I think so. So just based on it looks chaotic from the outside. But every report I hear from inside the locker room, they're in a good place, and I think it's also part of. You have 2 new coordinators. They're trying to get their footing.
It's a young team,
and so it's Jalen Hurts is on his 3rd offensive coordinator in 3 years. That's a lot. I don't think people realize when you turn over a playbook like that and put the play calling in another person's hands, you look at Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. that's been consistent for 8 years or whatever.
Well, there's an
or
established
6
relationship
years.
there.
Right? You figure out, like, I trust you to do this because we've been working together for years on this. But every time there's a new person in the locker room, especially in a position of calling plays, it's like, okay, well, I have to figure out what you guys are capable of doing. You have to trust me that I know that I know how to do that. And that takes time. That takes a lot of repetitions. And it takes a lot of we shall see. Washington scares me. They look really good this year. Detroit looks amazing. Again, they've created a culture. Dan Campbell's been there for a few years. The quarterback's been there for a few years. Like they have a built-in culture. I think the Eagles are still trying to figure out you had two veteran voices in Jason Kelsey and Fletcher Cox retire. Like those were two,
Yep.
as far as leadership in the room, Brandon Graham's still there, but you don't have a lot of those. You need younger guys to now step up into these leadership roles. That's a new thing for a lot of these guys. So
that's what I
now
said.
they got to find
They got to
find
their
narrative.
Yeah.
Right? And so
find their footing and stick it. You know?
I mean, but so far it sounds, but again, it's the narrative coming out of the room. And it sounds like it's good.
We're going to see how it goes.
We'll see.
They're causing a lot of stress and anxiety week after week with Eagles fans.
I know.
But that's nothing. You're going to get your money's worth this year, I believe, out of your season tickets. That's for sure. That'd be great. If you're looking for something different, if you're looking for pictures that are not your ordinary Olin Mills with the backdrop and the fence and wearing the same, khaki pants and white shirt. Not that there's anything wrong with that at the beach because that's what people do. But if you're looking to step outside that box and you're looking out, to have your story told, reach out to John because he can do that. And he has done that. And he's done it for me. He's done it with my pets at the end of life. He's done it for me with personal things. And he's done it with so many people. So, John, thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, this is great. This is the second time you've been around. So
it's been a while.
I'm stoked about that. And I thought nobody else, better to start with than yourself about switching gears because switching gears is such a tough thing to do. So
my whole thing is the only thing that is inevitable is change. So you either have to be the owner of that or be affected by it. I don't like being affected by things. So there's a control element to it.
And it's funny you say because my aunt was my boss in corporate America for many years, even though she told people, "Don't you tell people I'm your aunt. It's so difficult when your last name's the same." But she always said to me, "You know what, Britt? Change is change.
Yeah.
You can't say change is good, change is bad. Change is change. You just got to go with it, embrace it, make sure you do the best you can to guide it. And
what are you going to do to adapt? Because there's no stopping it. It's like saying you can guide a river, you can dam a river, but the water's going to be there and it's going to push up against something.
It's not going to stop.
Right. And so are you going to harness it or are you going to go with it and see where it takes you? And sometimes you do both. Sometimes it's all right, I took the river this far and now I'm going to carve a new channel and I'm going to take this little diversion and then come back, or I'm going to go out here. There's, you could stretch the metaphor all the way, but it's going to flow. That's just,
May not always be easy. It may not be, all sunshine and roses every day with it.
No.
But it'll be worth it.
Welcome to life. We get jackets,
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, but, and maybe, what we could do is next year bring it back and see how, your gears have shifted in a year because who knows what, tomorrow brings us. So
yeah, exactly.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it. It was
thanks
a great
for having me.
conversation. You got it. And everybody else out there, don't be afraid to switch gears. Switching gears is inevitable. Like we said, the only constant in life is change. We got to embrace it and go with it. And always remember, whatever it is you stand for, be a voice. This is Britt Carpenter on Usula Media. John, thanks for being here. The rest of you, have a great rest of your day. Be well always.